Practical Tips on How to Teach Reading with Jennifer Serravallo, episode 868.
This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Joining us once again is Jennifer Serravallo, a New York Times best-selling author and well-known literacy expert. She previously shared her invaluable insights on episode 801, How to Teach Better and Master Differentiated Reading Strategies. Her extensive experience as an educator and her acclaimed books, including the Reading Strategies book, have made her a trusted authority in the field of reading instruction. She continues to bridge the gap between research and practice with her latest work, Teaching Reading Across the Day. So, Jennifer, why the need for a new book? Has any of the research uncovered new things?
Well, Vicki, it's great to be in conversation with you again. Thanks for having me back on your show. It's that this book has topics I've never written about before. So even though I've written about reading before, the Reading Strategies book that you mentioned, I updated and re-released as the Reading Strategies book 2.0. That's a book that's about strategies. There's 300 strategies. The new edition has skill progressions and all new children's work examples or children's literature examples. But this book, Teaching Reading Across the Day, is really about lesson structures. So it's about, how do you do a really good read-aloud lesson? Believe it or not, I've never written about that before. How do you do a close reading lesson? What does a good shared reading lesson look like? A phonics lesson look like? So this is a book that's really meant to teach teachers how to streamline your planning, make sure that you're incorporating the most effective elements into a lesson plan of these different lesson types. And then how to make sure that not only is it well planned, but you're teaching responsively and you're noticing the students in front of you and you have the language ready to go to prompt, to nudge, to guide, to scaffold them as they're working through whatever text it is that you've selected.
When you have an amazing reading teacher, they just make it look so easy, don't they? Are there any things that you talk about in this book that you think are particularly difficult for teachers to kind of conceptualize and say, okay, here's the research and here's what it looks like in my classroom?
It's a great question. I work with a lot of teachers. I coach a lot of teachers. I have a great team of consultants that we travel around the country and support teachers in practice. And one thing I always hear from teachers is, how do I fit it all in? Right? Like, how do I know what to teach, which lessons to pick, and how in my really packed, overscheduled day do I have the minutes I need to be able to do it all? And so when I share in this book, I'm leaning on this body of research around explicit instruction. And what I'm sharing are these lesson structures that are really well structured and paced very deliberately according to the research around explicit instruction, allowing for, like I said before, responsiveness in addition to whatever it is that you're planning to teach. My hope here is that it helps teachers to fit more in, right? So my lesson is just very focused and streamlined and intentional. And I can, in a day, do a read-aloud lesson and a phonics lesson, and I can do a shared reading lesson to help kids reinforce what I taught in the phonics lesson. And we have some time for independent practice where kids are going to go off and read independently, right? So helps what's the best lesson type. I have a lot of guidance in the book. What's the best lesson type for this particular situation that I'm noticing from the student data? I'm going to make my choices of which lessons to pick, and then I'm going to do them really effectively and efficiently so that I have the ability to fit more into my day. It's just like pacing and timing is always a challenge.
Yeah. So, Jen, for someone who has never heard the term explicit instruction, how would you simply define it?
So I have elements of explicit instruction that I talk about in the book that are based on the research of Hollingsworth, Rosenshine, Archer, Hughes, and others. They each have their own set of principles of effective instruction or explicit instruction. I added the word engaging to my list. So I want instruction to be both explicit and engaging. Explicit means that I am deliberately and intentionally connecting new knowledge, what I'm teaching in the lesson, to what they already know. That I'm really clear about how I gradually release responsibility. I'm modeling, demonstrating, offering instructions that are super clear and it leaves nothing to chance. And I'm releasing responsibility through guidance and eventually independent practice. I'm breaking down concepts into very clear steps, and I have really clear strategies. So kids not only are able to do it with me, but then when they go off, they know how to do it on their own as well. I make sure throughout the entire lesson that kids are actively engaged, they're active participants, they collaborate with each other, they have opportunities to try things. And as a teacher, I'm always checking for understanding, and I'm offering feedback and giving scaffolds, and of course, differentiating to meet their needs as necessary. So those are the elements that make up explicit instruction. And then the 9 lesson types, you'll see those elements appear across all of them.
So where does teacher autonomy fit in as they're working with their students and they're responding? How does that fit in with explicit instruction? Do you feel like that some teachers feel like there's all these rules and there's no room for my unique take, my artistry as a teacher? Or do you feel like it brings in more teacher artistry?
I think it brings in more. I love that you asked this question, because we're very focused right now as a culture, as a country, around the importance of looking at the science, right? Making sure our instruction is research based or evidence backed or whatever term it is that or follows the science of reading. But there's also a lot of art to teaching reading, and I think some of the art is in the kinds of in-the-minute decision-making that you're using to respond to the students and to allow yourself to switch gears as necessary. So I personally feel like when you have a very clear structure, it allows for this innovation. I use this analogy in the book about improv. Have you ever seen stand-up or improv troops before?
Yeah, I love improv. When it's done by the right people, right?
Exactly. When it's done well, you're like, how did they do that? Right there. For those of you who haven't ever seen an improv show, they take suggestions from the audience. It could be completely random things. They'll be like, salmon, the fish, and they'll be like basketball. And then somehow they work salmon and basketball into a sketch, the narrative. It makes sense. And you're like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And the truth is, right, the way they do that art, the way they create is because they're following structures. They have these improv games that are really clear structures that they follow with rules to those games. And that allows them to innovate and be, improvisational. But I think teaching is a lot like this too. We have these structures, we have a plan. Every teacher knows you can't just stick to the script, even if it's a really, really good one. And I'm talking about whether it's a script that you have in your core program or it's something that you wrote for yourself, a lesson plan you wrote for yourself with the best intentions, the knowledge of your students and everything. You get in front of the kids and they surprise you, right? They need more repetition of something. They need another demonstration, or they've got it clearly. They're bored. Move on. The pacing is off. You got a couple kids that are kind of disengaged, and you got to, get them back together. So you changed what was going to be a think aloud into a turn and talk to make sure everybody's still working. We're making so many decisions as we're teaching that are critical to keeping kids engaged and making sure our message is getting across, that we're being explicit, we're being clear, we're being intentional.
I've noticed that even sometimes the weather outside, if it's cold outside and kids haven't been out, a lot of times I'll sense, okay, we've got to move a little bit more. But if it's hot outside and the kids have been outside and they've been hot and sweaty, sometimes they really actually want to listen to me a little bit more, And so sometimes just pivoting on the body language of your students makes a huge difference. Like, we can't be in straitjackets. We've just got to be, like you've said, artisans. If you look ahead, where do you see the next big area of where research and innovation in reading instruction needs to move? I mean, I know there are a lot of AI resources, and we've tested Reading Progress Coach. Now there's Read-Aloud for Google. There's all these tools out there. Are there any innovations you think are going to play a major role in reading that need to be studied next so they can end up in your next book, maybe?
I love that. That's a great question. So, I think that the science is pretty clear on some of the foundational skills work that we need to do with kids around explicit phonics instruction. And I think one of the reasons why it's pretty clear is that word level reading work is really a constrained skill. Like, meaning that there's a point at which you've mastered it, right? Mm-hmm. The area where things seem a little fuzzier in the research, or things seem a little more complicated and complex, is in the area of comprehension instruction. And I think it's because it's an unconstrained skill. It's something that we're constantly developing and constantly learning. And that's one of the things I talk about in this book is that we all need to be reading teachers, ELA teachers, science teachers, social studies teachers. We're all reading teachers. and across the day, right, we should be teaching reading. And also that we're not just teaching reading to little guys, we're teaching reading all the way through. As an adult, I don't know about you, Vicki, but as an adult, I still feel like I'm getting better as a reader.
Yeah.
Like the new challenges to my reading right now are challenges of discovering or trying to figure out whether something I'm reading on the internet can be trusted. Is it true? Right? Don't you feel like that's the challenge of now? Or even
It is. And
AI, right? Is it generated by AI or is this actually real, what I'm looking at? That's a kind of reading too, like looking at, images or looking at video or reading something. Is this real? I just think we're always learning to read. We're always trying to support our comprehension, and we need to be, as teachers, supporting kids' comprehension. So there's a lot of research about comprehension. There's a lot of different comprehension models, a lot of theories about how we make meaning. There's a kind of debate right now about strategies or knowledge building, and I argue in this book it's really both. I think there's just a lot more to study and a lot more to figure out so that we have the best approach possible to supporting comprehension. At the end of the day, those NAEP tests that everyone talks about, those are comprehension assessments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's something that we're maybe still needing to grow on and still needing to learn more about in that area.
I have a goal. I want to read a book a week. It changes our lives when we read. And for me, in some ways, it's looking at the timeless classics, because I know that we want to have, these AI tools can generate this based on what this one's interested in or that one's interested in. But there is a time and place for classics. There's such a beautiful array of writing for all of us to read. And, some of the most powerful reading I've seen is where the principal is reading and the teachers are reading and everybody's talking about the books they're reading, because isn't reading kind of like a lifestyle?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'd be really curious to see what happens once you start diving back into classics. Like, I don't know about you, it's been a while since I read a classic. Not what I go to pick. I've read a ton of research, I read a ton of professional books. I'm not picking like Pride and Prejudice or something like that, right? I wonder if you're going to notice it challenges your comprehension in some way, like what you do as a reader to try to figure out how to work your way through it. I don't know. You'll have to tell me.
Yeah. Actually, it took me a while. I'm taking a social media sabbatical to kind of unwire my brain from the swipe thing.
Yeah.
Because I've always been the type to sit down and read for 2 or 3 hours at a time. And literally, I found myself like reading for 4 minutes and then wanting to pick up my phone. And then I just came back from the Sync conference in Saudi Arabia, and the whole conversation was digital health and wellness and very much how smartphones are rewiring our brains. And it's like, you know what? I think I need to do some experiments on myself. Back up here, get off social media, see what it does to my brain, play some crossword puzzles. Like, I think that reflection is something we all need to do in terms of looking at our brains and how we're responding to this world, because, I can read for an hour and I feel like I've brought something out, even if it's fiction. But if I've swiped for an hour, I feel dumber every time, or I feel more afraid of sharks, or I feel like I want to be a grandmother because I see all babies, or whatever it is showing me that day.
Yeah. I'm so influenced by Dr. Marianne Wolf's writing about this topic and all of the research that she cites, and Dr. Kelly Cartwright and all the work she's done around executive functioning. That's another area of research that I think will be continuing to evolve. It is critical to developing readers is our attention, consciousness, our ability to engage and maintain focus over time. I mean, we hear it from teachers. I'm sure the teachers you're in conversation with are saying kids aren't reading like they used to. We ourselves as adults are reflecting on how challenging it is to sit still and focus in it. And I would say that's something that we can teach as teachers, just as you're working on rewiring your brain. I think teachers can teach lessons to support kids with different strategies of what to do when you notice your attention shifting, what to do when you are having a hard time getting locked into a book. Like, how do you find a better one? I think we can teach into that. And I think we can create conditions in the classroom to allow kids to detox from their screens and really engage with long form fiction, whole, nonfiction books or whatever it is, so they can get back, or if they never had it, if they're too young to have never had it, to really feel what it feels like to have that full, what Marianne Wolf calls this deep reading state.
And deep reading state is such a joy when you get to that point. It can take a while to get to that point. And, reading just unlocks everything. It does. And genuine, deep, authentic reading, because so many people are reading posers these days. Oh, if I can just get a summary here or summary there, it's just not the same. So the book is Teaching Reading Across the Day, and it really seems to be bridging the gap between research and practice. Jennifer Serravallo, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for being such a great resource to reading teachers everywhere.
Thank you. Right back at you, Vicki. Thanks for having me on the show, and thank you for your podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. Watch the video version of this podcast and catch my new radio and TV show, Cool Cat Teacher Talk, on YouTube and a radio or TV station near you. Just search Cool Cat Teacher and hit subscribe. For more tips, ideas, and inspiration, join my Cool Cat Teacher Classroom Matters newsletter at coolcatteacher.com/newsletter. Let's connect. I'm at Cool Cat Teacher everywhere on social media, and I'd love to hear from you. Leave a review if you found this helpful. See you later, educator.